Hello and welcome to this GSA Snapshot webinar on private mobile networks, looking in greater depth at the latest trends and momentum in the manufacturing sector. The on-demand recording of this session will be shared with you immediately following the event, and you can also download the presentation at any point by moving your mouse over the slides and clicking on the download icon in the top right of the screen. There will be time for questions following the presentation, so please do submit your questions using the Q&A chat box on the right side of the screen, and the team will endeavour to answer as many as possible. A link to the full GSA report that lies behind the data we're sharing today is available for download from the GSA website, and we'll also share a direct download link with you immediately following this event. We're joined today by three speakers. Nokia's Ate Lansisalmi, Working Group 3 Chair, at the 5G ACIA. Ate is going to set the scene for private mobile networks in the connected industries, look at some deployment scenarios and the state of play of industrial 5G. And that will set the scene then for Luke Pearce, Senior Analyst in the GSA Research Team. And Luke's going to share the latest market data from the GSA's Gambot databases and share some examples and case studies of private mobile in the manufacturing sector. But first, I'll hand over to Simon Bryant, the VP Research and lead of the Private Mobile Networks Special Interest Group at the GSA, to introduce today's webinar and GSA's work in this area.
Thank you very much, Richard. It's a pleasure to be on this webinar today and present the latest data focused on the leading vertical driving private mobile networks manufacturing. And we're basing all this data on our most recent private network data for Q2, which was published only last week. It's a pleasure to present this alongside Luke, who I work closely with in this area, but also Ati from 5G ACIA. It's great to have them on board as the leading organization representing the industry that we're focusing on this topic today. So let me begin by just giving a quick overview of the GSA, Global Mobile Suppliers Association. It has represented the global mobile ecosystem since 1998. It is made up of 9 major industry executive companies and nearly 90 associate companies, including leading manufacturers, silicon vendors, regulators, analyst firms, and operators. We provide research and statistics covering many aspects of 3GPP related topics. The research is based on extensive daily research that a team that I manage do on a daily basis. And in some cases, it's based on primary information collected confidentially from members of GSA. Private networks is a good example of that. It's working very successfully, but it also applies in other areas such as fixed wireless access. Have free and member reports that dive into these areas, tracking market development globally. Most of the reports that we publish draw upon our Gambot database, which I think Richard is going to highlight a little bit later. In terms of the research that we are providing, it's hosted in the Gambot database, and it is very extensive. We have within the Spectrum database, for example, 9,000 assignments showing Spectrum assignments globally. Our public networks database has very detailed information for 4,000 networks globally. Private networks, which we're going to talk about in some of the data later. Operators, we have data on 1,400 operators. Devices, 30,000 4G and 5G devices, of which mobile is less than half of that, but it covers many industrial and consumer devices, and a chipsets database as well. And across all this data, we're presenting on themes across NTN, satellite, fixed wireless access, 5G standalone, 3G sunset, and much more. Diving into the topic that we're going to be talking about today, the Private Mobile Network SIG, or Special Interest Group, was launched in 2021. It's tracking global references of customers of private mobile networks. We're looking at dedicated networks as opposed to those networks that are using the public infrastructure. Luke will explain this a little bit more in his part of the presentation. We know that what we're collecting from our members represents a truly unique data set, and it is accurate based on the part of the market that we're looking at, which is the leading aspect of private networks. And again, Luke will explain this in a moment. But the participants in the special interest group are providing their customer references, and 70% are not in the public domain or available via any other source. The SIG's goal is to accurately represent private mobile network traction globally, and support external firms like analyst firms as well. We're now represented by many leading companies that are listed at the bottom of that slide there. We're delighted that 5G ACIA have joined the group in the last year, which Ati will present more on that in a second. We have other leading groups such as OnGo Alliance, 450 Alliance, GSMA, among others. And we would welcome more companies. If there's other companies listening to this presentation who think that they can contribute to this special interest group, we would be glad to hear from you after this webinar. On that note, I'm going to hand over to Ati to tell you a bit more about 5G ACIA.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, GSA, for the invitation to be here today. What I'd like to do is to give you a brief presentation of 5G ACIA and what we do. So 5G ACIA is a globally leading organization for driving and shaping industrial 5G. Our mission is to work in the areas of deployment, integration, innovation, and ecosystem. Our members come from the OT, the industrial automation side, the ICT side, and the academia, representing both of these sides, and the end users from the industrial automation side. Our objectives, they are around the 6 topics here. First of all, to establish a common language, and then to reflect the OT requirements in the standardization and regulation. Then we have worked in the area of analyzing the 5G and how it can benefit the industrial IoT. We have identified relevant certification and testing needs. And maybe the most important topic at this point is developing a sustainable industrial 5G ecosystem, and then overall promotion of industrial 5G worldwide. And our vision is that there are benefits in using industrial 5G in the industrial domain. It's a merger of the 2 worlds in the Industry 4.0 era, if you will. We're looking for improvements in the flexibility, efficiency, productivity, and usability. And I think this is already showcased in the deployments worldwide. 5G ACIA has today 100 member organizations. So these come primarily from the ICT side, then OT companies are the next biggest group, then academia, and the end users, which are the factory or plant owners, they are the smallest group and the newest group. Here is our structure, and in the center you see our working group structure, and it kind of goes across or introduces the work areas as well. So we have use cases and requirements, the ecosystem and regulatory framework working group, which also looks into spectrum. Then we have working group 3 on system architecture and integration, which I am chairing. Then liaisons and marketing, which is also very important activity we drive in 5G ACIA. And then industrial 5G in practice, which is about test beds and documentation about practical usage. And these working groups, they primarily meet virtually based on needs. And then we meet with the plenaries 4 times a year. One of them is a virtual plenary, but the 3 plenaries, as well as the General Assembly once a year, they provide an excellent place to meet people and to coordinate on topics. in addition to the sort of internal organization meetings, we do marketing events. We have been very visible in the Hannover Messe, not only in Germany, but for instance, this year we are in the China event as well. And then we organize ourselves an event called Industrial 5G Day, and we've had 2 of them per year for the last years, let's say after the COVID period. And with Industrial 5G Day is kind of a mini conference and exhibition. Here, some pictures from the event we had in Taipei at the end of last year. The format of our technical work is white papers, and we have over the last 6 years produced quite a few of them. Here are some examples in maybe no particular order, other than that the latest 4 are on the top left corner. And just to give you a highlight about one of the white papers, which is on private networks and the deployments in industrial scenarios, which is the topic of today. So just to give you a highlight on that, in all of the industrial or manufacturing facilities, there is some sort of industrial network which consists of different domains. And we first looked at the industrial network structures in a typical case, and we identified where wireless communication would be used with these. They're shown here with these orange arrows on the left picture. And then we gave an example of a deployment of a 5G network. So on the right side, we have shown actually 2 separate instances of a 5G network. As far as the network nodes go, of course, these can be part of the same logical network, which highlights the point that you need to bring these networks to the site. You really cannot serve them from exactly the same infrastructure as the public networks. But obviously, you can still do this with the public network, or public network operator can do this as well, as we have seen in some regions. So the point is to make, you need to have a local network, but whether it's BNI, NPN, or SNPN, it's yet another topic. So just to round it up, in 5G ACIA, we have already done some good things. We have created the collaboration, the language, we have defined the use cases, they have been provided to the standardization. We have identified the use cases and deployments for private networks, and we have covered several topics in the shop floor and IT integration, and we have a number of test beds going. So a lot of the technical work has already been done, but then there are some other topics still to work. So industrial 5G has not been picking up as fast as it could. So there are things in the 5G standards that we haven't yet seen in the products. And there is a bit of this hen and egg or chicken and egg discussion, which should be going first, the deployments or the devices that support these features. And this is the topic that we try to solve in the future discussions in 5G ACIA. So this completes my part of the presentation, and I'd be happy to hand it over to Luke.
Thanks very much, Ate, and delighted to be working with the 5G ACIA a lot closely. And myself and Simon had the pleasure of visiting one of the industrial 5G days over in Austin a couple of months ago, and yeah, really insightful presentations. So definitely recommend checking out 5G ACIA and all the amazing work that they're doing there as well. So just to talk today then a little bit about some of the numbers and kind of market traction of private mobile networks in manufacturing specifically. So as Simon's kind of mentioned already, we have this, as part of the Private Mobile Network Special Interest Group, we are tracking customer references on a quarterly basis. So all those references we collect are 3GPP based. So we're just looking at either LTE or 5G. So we're not looking at any kind of proprietary systems or those on Wi-Fi or Sigfox or LoRa or any other kind of network implementations such as those. When we're looking at the numbers today, bear in mind that one customer reference per company per country. So what that means is that where there's an organization with multiple networks or deployments, so a manufacturing facility may have rolled it out across a number of factories in a country, that is just counted as one customer reference. So just a note there. We're also looking at just commercial contracts worth more than 100,000 euros. So that is generally the accepted threshold and the definition by the group in terms of a real commercial deployment, not really including those kind of small demonstrations or free trials by having that kind of that boundary. And we're also looking at both named and anonymous non-public references as well. So some of the manufacturing case studies we'll talk about today at the end of the presentation are out there in the public domain, but many in the database are anonymous as well. And that means our database is pretty unique in comparison to some others out there as well. So the presentation today will focus on the manufacturing segment specifically, and we've just published now a manufacturing report which outlines some of the kind of charts and data I talk about today, which is already available on the GSA website. And is looking specifically at the manufacturing industry within private mobile networks. Private networks covers a variety of different OT and IT industries, but manufacturing is the one we've chosen to focus on today. And a lot of that is based on that latest private networks report, which has also just been published and includes references up to Q2 2024. And we'll also look at some of the industrial devices in the ecosystem from our Gambod database, as well as some information on Spectrum and case studies as well. So Atta has already kind of highlighted some of the real kind of market drivers facilitating private network adoption generally, but certainly the kind of spiraling data security, digitization and mobility requirements of modern day business, all this connected systems with big data and analytics really to help transform operations, automation and efficiency. And it's really the wireless element, wireless networking with LTE or 5G that helps enable these transformations to take place, even in case of it's a really dynamic environment, a very remote environment, or a very highly secure environment as well. So that's a real benefit of mobile technology in this scenario. Of course, LTE advanced, but also 5G particularly brings a real step change in terms of the improved density, so support for a larger number of users and devices, as well as the dramatic improvements to latency. So we can do things like time-critical applications, which were not possible before. They're often part of a broader digital transformation program as well. So thinking about things like cloud networking, like digital technologies such as AI and machine learning and data analytics, more and more of these applications will use these connectivity capabilities combined with mobile to really bring some of those to life a little bit. And there's also many other kind of alternative technologies out there, some perhaps more legacy than others, but certainly 5G and LTE are really bringing the critical broadband services that are just simply not available from alternative technologies. So we're really seeing private LTE and 5G eventually replacing some of these alternative technologies that are in use as well. So looking at the big picture of private mobile networks, and every quarter we update and present this data, and this is the overall picture, we see pretty consistent growth. We've seen customer announcements growing at a compound annual growth rate now of about 46% from 2019 to 2024. And in the latest update in Q2, we saw 105 customer additions in the last quarter. So up slightly, I think, from Q1, and that's 23% year-on-year growth from Q2 2023. So, very consistent growth each quarter, double-digit growth, doing very well. Please note as well, this is just the number of customers. So as we mentioned before, some of these customers are rolling out across multiple sites, or revenue as well. So actual growth may well be slightly higher than this number as well. But it's certainly a market which is still in a very much a growth phase. So the reason we're focusing on manufacturing today and in the report published is that the manufacturing sector really is a strong adopter of private mobile networks. And you can see that very clearly there on the chart on the right. We've now got 298 different identified companies all involved in kind of known pilots or deployments with private mobile networks. And there's certainly different types of manufacturing within that overall bracket. So within the report, we break out those between discrete and process manufacturing, and we'll come on to some of those subcategories in the next slide or two. But certainly manufacturing is the one which continues to see the highest growth. It grew 7% in the last quarter, but in real terms, it's still growing and outperforming all other verticals in the private mobile network market as well. Certainly the high reliability and reduced downtime which mobile connectivity gives to factories and industrial manufacturing is a big pro for this technology. There is the bandwidth and uplink capability of 5G really helping with some of these new technologies such as AI, machine learning, robotics, digital twins, compute vision. All of these use cases are really being helped and enabled by 4G and 5G. And we can see how that's kind of really changed over the last few years. Back in 2018, when this technology was even more in an earlier phase, it was really kind of the large outdoor rail networks, defense networks, power utilities, mining. These made up the majority of references in about 2018. You can see that power and utilities and defense, 15% and 12% each. But since then, it's really the growth of manufacturing, which has been driving that recent growth, and that is becoming slightly more affordable for 5G private networks to operate on a smaller scale. Certainly new deployment models like as a service subscriptions and managed services, access to spectrum of course as well becoming a lot easier, which is really helping to drive private mobile network adoption in a larger variety of verticals, and particularly the growth of 5G and its capabilities in indoor industrial settings is also contributing towards that continued adoption in new use cases and devices for private networks as well. So looking at some of the kind of subcategories of manufacturing, we categorize those in both reports there, and you can see there on the right that it's really the electrical equipment, appliances and components, which is number one, and second is automotive as well. So these really kind of discrete manufacturing, I think, which is double the number of process manufacturing, is much further along in terms of adoption as well. And we see that lots of machinery in there as well, agricultural engineering in the machinery and equipment category, computer, electronic and optical products. So there are lots of these kind of sub verticals in the higher echelons of the manufacturing numbers. Generally, I think there's a higher R&D spending in these industries. There's also very capital intensive industries and also have a large degree of complexity as well as electrification, which perhaps is why discrete is kind of leading the way a little bit here, particularly kind of automotive is some of those that we see more publicly as well. But there are some process manufacturing as well. We see metals, chemicals, pharma, some paper mills there in Northern Europe and Asia also coming into play. So yeah, just an interesting picture of some of the sub verticals that are driving some of that market traction in manufacturing. If we look at how that's developing regionally, it's quite clear that Europe actually has the largest number of manufacturing customer references in our database. North America and Asia combined actually have the same 46% as Europe, and a lot of these in Europe are automotive, as we mentioned, and that's perhaps unsurprising. Countries like Germany, for instance, within that mix, and really kind of leading the way for automotive private 5G manufacturing, but also France and the UK having some automotive manufacturing capabilities there as well. We also see some paper and machinery, paper mills, particularly in Sweden and Northern Europe, doing well in Europe there as well. Asia, again, lots of electrical equipment, appliances and components, some metals in there as well. Countries like Japan and South Korea really driving a lot of the manufacturing in Asia Pacific. China, of course, is in there, and it's important to note that China's model of private mobile network is perhaps slightly different to our definition. Our definition is pretty much a dedicated core standalone private 5G network. For China, a lot of those are based on the public network as well, which does differ slightly in our definition, but there are lots of Chinese manufacturing facilities that are also operating with private mobile networks as well. So that's just something to bear in note. Other regions, Latin America, Middle East, a bit less, but certainly a lot of the process manufacturing. We see tobacco, we see food, Nestle in Brazil, for instance, as well as some oil and gas production in those regions as well. So Ate obviously talked a lot about 5G, and 5G certainly is a huge part of the manufacturing private mobile network department, and we see about 60% of customer references utilizing 5G for manufacturing. But 5G only deployments account for about 28%, whereas the rest are combined with that LTE component too. 5G certainly provides those advantages in terms of kind of latency and uplink speeds as well for those time critical applications in manufacturing, but there's still lots of LTE in the market. LTE only references make up 39% of the manufacturing references we have, and it still provides sufficient performance for many of the use cases being used, but also a more developed and cost-effective ecosystem, something that kind of Ate alluded to with the chicken and the egg scenario, and the kind of device landscape still in its early phases, but progressing well. Looking at spectrum, in terms of the spectrum used by the manufacturing references we have in our database, it's quite clear there that C-band is where the most popular spectrum allocation, quite clearly ahead of any other types of implementation, and that's the one we really see most widely provided to enterprise use as well by regulatory telecom authorities, where we've got dedicated spectrum in some countries, particularly those in Germany, all in the C-band there as well, which really provides that best blend between range, capacity, and speeds as well. Some of the others, we see CBRS in there at second with 9 references. The US's allocation of CBRS there as well, and we also see some those in the 2 gigahertz range as well, in the kind of middle of the pack there. Millimeter wave is a question that we get quite a lot, and there's still quite a lot of interest in, particularly in manufacturing. But so far we've only got it in about just 2 customer references, and they are really more in the kind of device lab testing phase at the moment. So still a few years away, I think, from millimeter wave, but lots of work going on there in terms of how it can best be used in those industrial scenarios. Looking to the ecosystem, as Simon alluded to at the beginning of the presentation, we have a Gambod database which showcases all of the cellular devices out there in the wild. Lots of those are, of course, consumer devices, but we also are tracking industrial LTE and 5G devices as well. So we've got a number of about 6,418 industrial LTE and 5G devices, a variety of different form factors. You can see there that the majority are kind of industrial grade CPEs or routers or gateways at about 47%. We've also got lots of modules in there, as well as asset trackers, lots of sensors and data loggers, as well as a small amount of kind of onboard vehicle units and robots as well. But 91% of the devices in our database are LTE. So as we kind of mentioned already, but that 5G ecosystem is still at its early phases, particularly for industrial devices. But over the last year or so, we have seen that number increase quite a lot as well. And another innovation, which we haven't had too much time to talk about so far, but 5G RedCap, we think will kind of help to grow that ecosystem. We've got a report in the GSA about RedCap and the number of countries investing. It's about 13 countries now, including China, the United States, Germany, the United Kingdom, and Thailand, all countries where manufacturing and private 5G manufacturing are quite advanced as well. So that will certainly help to grow the device ecosystem and some of the uses used in those markets as well. So coming just to the end of the presentation now, just looking at some of the logos, some of the examples and case studies. I haven't got a huge amount of time to go into these, but certainly there are logos that you'd recognise and expect when looking at kind of really innovative private 5G manufacturing. So in kind of Europe, you've got some of the bigger names like BMW, who are quite early on in their journey in private networks, and actually have a few factories around the world now with private 5G. Some in kind of Germany, but also some in China as well. Tesla is the one which was announced a few months ago, and Tesla, with all its marketing efforts, the Gigafactory in Berlin, and the using private 5G there was a real kind of a boost for the industry, despite many other automotive manufacturing also experimenting with private 5G quite a lot. In the Americas, you kind of got John Deere there, who are using private 5G in their factory, particularly for flexibility and being able to really adapt production to account for seasonality in their manufacturing facilities, and finding strong benefits there of using this technology. Nestle in Brazil, there's also a recent one over the last year or so announcing that they've got a private 5G factory in operation, which is really helping to achieve their ROIs in that market as well, and lots of other names across the world as well. So yeah, the idea here is really just to see that there are lots of different multinational firms, names that you'd all recognize, really not just experimenting and trialing, but actually beginning to really see strong benefits to using private 4G and 5G in those manufacturing facilities. And the 5G ACI events often share some really great case studies and bring up speakers from sort of end users who are using these technologies day in, day out, and to showcase not just how easy it is, because of course there are many challenges, but some of the results that private mobile networks can bring to their organizations as well. So certainly read the report and look out for other material as well on some of the case studies being used for private mobile networks. So just to wrap up, we've just talked about kind of manufacturing being the largest adopter of private networks. It accounts for 20% or 1/5 of all customer references, and is continuing to grow very strongly. Electrical equipment, appliances and components, as well as automotive, certainly the strongest subcategories in the manufacturing industry as well. Europe is actually seen as quite a dominant region, with lots of manufacturing deployments here, a lot in Germany as well. 60% of customers using 5G in manufacturing, but LTE still used in many networks, with 39% LTE only. Dedicated C-band spectrum, certainly the most popular for manufacturing applications. Device ecosystem is pretty small generally, but growing, particularly for 5G and 5G RedCap will help to boost the market. And there is already a large variety of large multinational companies already using private networks to improve automation, efficiency, and flexibility. So thanks very much. That does conclude the presentation we've got for you today, but myself and Simon and Ate are available now to take some questions in terms of answering about private networks or manufacturing or 5G ACIA or GSA or however you best like to structure your questions. So I'll pass you back over to Simon, who's been looking at the question box, looking at some of those coming in, but please, if you haven't done so already, input your questions into the question box and we'll try our best to get those answered. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Luke and Ati. Appreciate that. So yeah, there's a few questions coming through. A couple of questions. If you can, Luke, just clarify how we are counting customer references. And a sort of follow-on question from that is, is the large number of European deployments because European countries are small? So is there any relationship between how we're counting the number of customer references and the high number in Europe? Any thoughts on that? There's two questions in that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So generally when we're looking at one country, one company per country. So yeah, we're looking at if BMW was to have a facility in China and Germany and the UK, for instance, that would be 3 separate references. So it's only a case where if there's lots of factories in one country, then that would just still be one customer. Although I can see why the logic may apply to that, the smaller countries and perhaps manufacturing facilities having a variety of different across those countries. Generally, I wouldn't say that's what we see in the data. The database is available to see, and I think you'll be able to see that actually that's not necessarily the case. It's not the same company with different with their same name, but in lots of those different countries. Generally, it is just the fact that there's a larger base of manufacturing in Europe and Germany for automotive and the kind of industries that are adopting this technology as well. That's kind of what I would say to that.
Okay, thank you very much. And another question I've got here, and I'm getting messages that my connection isn't good, so apologies if you're struggling to hear me. But maybe for Ati, do you have a sense about use cases in manufacturing that's driving private network adoption? Is there anything you've seen along those lines, and specifically, I guess, for 5G as well is part of the question?
Right. So the use cases that you can run in the current networks are quite similar to, well, the capabilities that are offered in the current networks are those that are available in the public networks. So the use cases, therefore, they're related to worker safety, handheld devices. We have some augmented reality going on. Various types of use cases. From 5G ACIA perspective, I think the more important and interesting topic is what is not available currently, and we're looking into how to bring, for example, native support of Ethernet into products which we see coming, TSN, and then the lower latencies. I'm not saying ultra low, but lower latencies that the industrial domain would like to see supported in the products.
Okay, thank you very much. Luke, I don't know if you've got anything to add on that one as well?
No, I think that covers it. I think that's a great answer.
Okay. How is the millimeter wave devices market developing? Any thoughts on that, Luke?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the chipsets have supported millimeter wave now for a few generations. We do have, millimeter wave support, and certainly in terms of the kind of regulatory landscape, a lot of millimeter wave spectrum is being auctioned for enterprise use in many countries across the world. But certainly, as we're seeing, it's not being used so much. There are still challenges with millimeter wave, and in terms of kind of penetration and kind of line of sight, and some other kind of more complicated differences with millimeter wave. And there aren't that many devices that are leveraging millimeter wave today. As kind of Ate alluded to, it's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario. Would you agree with that, Ate, with millimeter wave devices?
I do. So it's not something that you'd be seeing currently in the deployments.
Yeah. So yeah, still not quite yet, but I think there is still potential, but there's work to be done, I think, for millimeter wave.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question here is, are there any MNO lead cases in the stats if the MNO deploys private spectrum or a slice on his network?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if the MNO is kind of leading, if the MNO is involved in the deployment or leading the deployment, that's fine. It's more of a case of MNO slices aren't included within the scope of our definitions. Generally, we are looking for kind of standalone, kind of separate, dedicated core and dedicated RAN for those deployments. But there are a few cases where MNOs are using network slices to manufacturing. Certainly not to the same extent we're seeing with the numbers we were showing today, but there are certainly a few use cases and a few examples that we see. I think there are a couple mentioned in the accompanying report as well. But Ate, is that something that you see in manufacturing so much, the kind of MNOs using network slicing off the public network at all?
Well, we're not tracking what's happening in the market so closely, but it does align with my understanding. So as I was showing with the private network deployment slide, you really need to get local to the network, to the site of the industrial operation, and the most natural way to do that is to deploy a fully standalone NPN. However, it's completely possible to do that as part of the public network and separate it by a logical means to utilize a network slice or something like that. I think we'd have the answers if we look more closely into what's going on in China, because over there the spectrum is owned by the mobile network operators, while private networking in industrial domain is a thing that is taking place in China very much. So unfortunately, I don't have the answer how exactly they are doing it currently predominantly. I'm pretty sure they have all options in use there as well.
Yeah.
Very good. Maybe time for one or two more questions. Here's an interesting one. Maybe one or both of you could give thought on this. Do you foresee challenges in developing chipsets and private network devices due to the differing global spectrum allocations that we see? I assume the answer is yes, but any thoughts on that, either of you?
Well, my understanding is that the differences in global spectrum allocations is not really the main problem. The problem comes from some other industrial oriented features, and I'm alluding to ultra low latency, for instance, or TSN support, that are challenging because the industrial market is very small compared to the public network market, if you will, or enhanced mobile broadband. And in the calculations of the chipset makers, this is something that weighs a lot. So they haven't been eager in bringing these features into the market. But again, I'm not with the understanding that this would relate to the spectrum support per se, but maybe Luke, you have more to add to that.
Yeah, no, I would just say, I kind of agree. There are many challenges at the moment, and although all of the story we're showing is growth, and that is true, it is still, there is still a huge potential here that's still kind of in its early phases. So yeah, there are many challenges. One definitely is I would say the kind of spectrum between the different countries not being unified, as your kind of comment alludes to. It's a bit easier in the US, where you've kind of got CBRS or C-band that is kind of unified across the whole geographic site. So if you are a US-based manufacturer with many sites across the US, then all of your spectrum assets and your devices and your kind of blueprint setup can be identical, if you like. But if you are particularly a country in Europe or in Asia, you've got different kind of spectrum allocations in maybe smaller areas across those different countries as well. So yeah, that it is definitely a challenge. But I know there are initiatives ongoing, particularly with the EU, looking at how to kind of unify that across EU member states with kind of 3.8 to 4.2. And yeah, there is definitely work ongoing looking at that as well, because that is another challenge.
Thank you very much. I think that brings us to the end of the Q&A. There's lots more questions I'm afraid we haven't had a chance to answer, but we will do our best to follow up via email to answer those. But thank you very much, Ati. Really appreciate your input, and likewise, Luke. And I'll hand back over to Richard now.
Great, thank you very much. And I'll just close today's GSA Snapshot by once again thanking you and our three speakers for joining us today. After the event, you will receive a link to the webinar recording and to the reports that are sat behind today's presentation, and also a link to the reports that I referred to on the 5G ACIA website as well. Throughout the year, we'll have more events, including snapshot webinars on particular technologies and markets that are being tracked in the Gambol database, spotlights on different regions around the world, and also plenaries of the Fixed Wireless Access Forum. Our next event will focus on the results of this year's Fixed Wireless Access CPE vendor survey, and that's in a couple of weeks, and that will provide a global health check on the state of the Fixed Wireless Access ecosystem, particularly from the sort of vendor CPE perspective. Access to the detailed data behind the GSA reports and webinars is available to all employees of GSA member and associate organizations via the GSA website. So if your company is a member of GSA or GSA associate, you personally have access to all this data in the Gambol database. If you'd like more information about how your organization can get involved in the GSA and access the 6 extensive databases, please do get in touch via info@gsacom.com. For the latest updates on all our research activities and upcoming events, again, you can find more on our social channels. And if you visit the website, you can subscribe to the weekly Research Digest email that delivers all the reports direct into your inbox, and to our monthly newsletter, which brings a one-stop shop for all the latest reports and insights from GSA. So finally, on behalf of the team, all that remains for me to say is thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon at the next GSA event. Many thanks.